Terence Crawford says the Errol Spence Jr. fight will be next, even if the David Avanesyan fight flops. Alright, y'all, it's your boy, Cardinal Red Sports. Let's talk about it. So, Terence Bud Crawford feels like even if his upcoming fight on December 10th on BLK Prime pay-per-view with David Avanesyan, even if it flops, even if it drops a big turd, then he feels like he'll still make the fight next with Errol the Truth Spence Jr. And to be honest, a few questions come to mind when you listen to that statement. The number one question is, how do you expect to negotiate a Errol Spence Jr. fight after a humongous flop fight with Avanesyan, and you couldn't negotiate a Spence fight after you did a decent fight with Shawn Porter? How do you expect to get a higher percentage out of Errol Spence and PBC coming off that David Avanesyan, and you couldn't get a higher percentage coming off a decent performance versus Shawn Porter? Even though I think a lot of people feel like Porter's father threw in the towel way too early, even though I don't think Porter was going to win that fight at all, but he didn't knock Porter out. Porter wasn't even hurt at all. It almost seemed like they made a friendly agreement to not hurt each other and just get through the fight and get them paychecks. So, I think it's kind of crazy for Terence Crawford to feel like he can negotiate with Spence based off a pay-per-view event that's not going to do anything. Now, perhaps in his mind, I just negotiated myself a $10 million payout. That makes me more of a negotiator, and that gives me leverage in the negotiating room. That means I can talk to the higher-ups, the people with the money, the Al Haymans of the world, and I can negotiate myself a better spot. But at the end of the day, you got to think about it like, if you're basing all this off of the popularity, the belts, the pay-per-view sales, then you would have to say that Terence Crawford is probably going to end up getting less than what he was offered the first time, because not only did Spence have to go back, find another fight because you bailed on him and you left him in a peculiar situation. So, number one, that's going to make Spence want to negotiate harder. That's going to make Al Heyman and them not want to bend so much. You've already shown your ability to not stand by your word, and you've already shown your ability to walk away from something that was so big and that should have happened. I don't see them wanting to play around in the negotiating room for 8 more months trying to make a fight with Terence Crawford. And nothing about the David Avanesyan fight tells me that it's going to go any different than that. Even if the David Avanesyan fight does above average, like 250,000, 300,000 buys, I still don't think Terence Crawford is in any position to try to negotiate with Spence and Al Heyman and PBC. Number two, I would have to say it's because you're forcing Spence to have to fight Keith Thurman, who he never wanted to fight, who basically dissed him and wouldn't give him a chance when Thurman was a champion. And I think that adds even more fuel to the fire. If the fire wasn't raging already enough on the fact that Terence Crawford walked away from probably the biggest fight of his career, then the fact that Spence has to go through Thurman and it's mandatory and there's nothing he can really do about it, that's going to turn that fire in the negotiating room into an inferno. And I think you're going to see 70-30 get mentioned a lot. Now, there's something else to me that I think is standing out about the whole Terence Crawford situation. It almost seems like the David Avanesyan fight is a cash-out fight. Like, he knows in the back of his mind, I can't beat Errol Spence, so I had to go get me a nice, decent chunk of money before I lose my title and all my fans. So before I actually take the Spence fight, why don't I go take a David Avanesyan fight to where I just get a huge payout and really don't have to do nothing. I don't have to risk my title. I don't have to worry about getting beat. I don't have to worry about getting injured. This should be a fairly easy walk in the park type fight. And that part I can't agree with. I do think that Terence Crawford is preparing for retirement. And perhaps in his mind, it's like, okay, I got $10 million for the Avanesyan fight. I'll get, 10, 15 million for the Spence fight. We'll do a rematch. I'll get another 10, 15, maybe 20 million if I win for the Spence rematch. Hey, I've made almost $100 million in less than 2 years. Now, the thing about that is he's thinking about it from the standpoint of, okay, after my fight, I'm going straight into a Spence fight. But what he's not thinking about is the WBA and the ruling that came out regarding Emino Santos and Virgil Ortiz. So, you can hope and wish and pray and all that good stuff for Errol Spence Jr. fight next, but how are you going to just sidestep David Avanesyan and Virgil Ortiz? Whoever wins that fight is supposed to automatically get Spence next. So, for anybody and everybody saying that the Spence fight is happening after the Avanesyan fight, I think you're completely wrong. I don't think the Spence fight is happening after the Avanesyan fight because of the WBA's ruling and the Emino Santos and Virgil Ortiz situation. I just don't see that fight happening in 2023 as far as Spence Crawford at all. Early 2024, there's a possibility. Now, what does that leave Crawford off? Does he have to go fight Boots, which a lot of people are thinking that and saying that Boots has been elevated and he'll be next for Crawford, which I doubt. I think it ends up in Crawford fighting another unknown. I'm hoping for a Pacquiao fight because he definitely ain't getting in there with Boots no time soon. So you can hope for a Pacquiao fight, if Pacquiao does well. And it's kind of ironic because it's something I didn't even think about. Pacquiao's fight is the same night of the Crawford fight. Wouldn't it be ironic a Pacquiao exhibition outsold a Terence Crawford sanctioned fight? If the Pacquiao fight does numbers higher than the Crawford fight, I mean, what does that say really about Terence Crawford? I didn't even realize they were fighting on the same night until I just looked at the fight dates. Like, what? Okay, so they are fighting on the same night. If he does outsell Crawford, hey man, it's gonna be a rough year for Terence Crawford. But he could capitalize off of that. If Pacquiao still can put up numbers, you definitely might see Terence Crawford go after that next and not a Boots fight or a Errol Spence fight, because I think the Spence fight is off the table anyway. Y'all let me know what y'all think about that down in the comment section below. Hit that like button for me. Share. Subscribe. Holler at me on all social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. More than likely to get a response on the tube, so holler at me over there. And we are
Now some came up around the ones that was moving there. Some came up around the ones that was using it. Me, I was the latter, so I got it in my jeans. 2 separate pills and a little green. My little homie been serving since 98. Asking for a 50 die back. Get your paper straight. It's a paper chase. Don't let your paper waste. Staying low will keep you from the time that you would've faced. But niggas need to see it for themselves. I wish all my peoples would've seen it for they left. But the world keeps spinning, nigga, life or death. So I'm at my own business trying to write myself. Some niggas jot it down, I don't write myself. I just let it breathe, trying to make a better me. But it's hard when the devil's all in your face on a 24/7 basis. Trying to make it